everyone. Okay, hello, my name is Lee Taylor, and I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. For those of you that can't see me, I'm a middle-aged white female with blondish brown hair, and I wear glasses, and I like big earrings. Our session today is in Zoom webinar. That means that all attendees are muted and your videos are off. We are recording the session, and I'll make that recording available very soon. As far as the session's already recorded, I'll drop the link in the chat box so you can go back and watch any of our previous sessions. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen for questions. We will have time for some questions and answers at the end of our presentation. American Sign Language interpreters will be on screen throughout the session. You may change your view at the top portion of your screen. Also, we are using captioning this morning. If you do not see that at the bottom of your screen, click on the CC button at the bottom. We know that there are going to be technical difficulties today, and we appreciate your patience as we encounter those. Okay, here are the important slides for anyone wanting continuing education credit or certificates of attendance. You must be in the content portion of the webinar for at least 90% of the session to be eligible for a certificate. This is a mandate from the boards. Please do not leave the webinar until the conclusion of the Q&A, as that counts as part of the session. You do not have to enter your contact information in the chat, as attendees and their time is tracked by Zoom. You must use the same email or link to participate in the session as the one you used to register. For example, if you receive the link to your work email, but you join from your cell, you're fine because it's under the same email address. If you are using a link forwarded to you by a coworker, that will not work. We will not be able to recognize you in the session, and you will not be eligible for a certificate. This is our way of tracking who's in the room with us. Also, you must use the same email address to register for each System of Care and Learning Series session. That is the unique identifier used to track attendance. Okay. So at the beginning of December, I'm not going to say the first week because there's only 2 days the first week, but by the end of that next week, you'll receive an email from me that will provide a link to access the session evaluation, then your certificate. You must complete the session evaluation to proceed to the certificate. There's a screenshot to show you the landing page for the evaluations and certificates. Lastly, you are responsible for printing your own certificate. We do not mail or email those anymore. This website houses several years of the System of Care Academy. So if you lose your certificate, you can access this website to print another. Now, let's learn about our presenters. First, we have Lindsay Brillheart. She's a 44-year-old mom of 2 daughters, aged 21 and 11, and she has been with her partner for almost 12 years. She has worked with the Association for Successful Parenting, called TASP, for 13 years as a self-advocate. She promotes parenting with a disability with help and tells her successful story all around the world, mostly US, Canada, and Australia. Our next presenter is Gerry Gordon-Brown, who is the Associate Director and then the Director of Kentucky's Client Assistance Program for many years. She retired from the state of Kentucky in 2015 after 20 years of service. She now serves on a variety of boards and commissions, including the Coalition for the Homeless in Louisville, the Kentucky Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and the Braden Board of Directors for Social Issues. In 2005, she was inducted into the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame. Gerry has a daughter, 3 grandsons, who she calls her 3 wise men, and 4 great-grandchildren. Our next presenter is Carissa Johnson. She's the Satellite Office Manager for the Center for Accessible Living in Murray, Kentucky. Go Racers! She is a certified social worker with a master's in social work from Western Kentucky University. Carissa is the 2017 recipient of the National Independent Living Council Region 4 Advocacy Award for work with Accessible Murray. Carissa lives in Murray with her husband, Ben, and their adopted son, Will. Next, we have Sandra Williams, who recently retired from Kentucky State Government, where she spent 20 years as an independent living counselor with the Kentucky Office for the Blind and later with the Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. In that position, she was responsible for in-home training of people losing their vision. She taught blindness skills in the areas of daily living, financial management, advocacy, and counseling. She has an adopted son and an adopted daughter. Dave Matheis retired from Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation after nearly 30 years of service, spending the last 15 years of it as an agency's program planning and development branch manager. He currently works part-time at the Center for Accessible Living in Louisville. He graduated from Bellarmine College, now university, in 1976 with a bachelor's degree in history. He has worked in the disability field for 46 years. Mr. Matheis is the editor of A Celebration of Family, Stories of Parents with Disabilities, published by the Center for Accessible Living and the Avocado Press in the summer of 2021. And our moderator of today's session is Michelle Niehaus. She is the program administrator for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services with the Kentucky Division of Mental Health. She facilitates the Behavioral Health Equity Action Planning Committee and serves on multiple committees, including the Kentucky Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and the Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Advisory Committee. And now we'll have a celebration of family parenting with disabilities.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Niehaus. Thank you so much for the great introduction, Lee. For my image description, I am also a middle-aged woman. I have shoulder-length brown hair that's quickly graying, and I have brown glasses. Behind me is a blue curtain. And I am so excited to have everyone here today. There's no way we're going to give justice to everyone's story in an hour and a half. We've also learned about grace and flexibility, which is a huge part of parenting, no matter if you have a disability or you don't. Unfortunately, Gerry Gordon-Brown will not be able to join us today. She was having trouble with connectivity. So I'm going to ask Dave to share some of her stories as we go along. Gerry is absolutely amazing. She walked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When she was a K-State student. She has also been a strong advocate for disability rights throughout her entire life. And at 82, she is still going strong. So I encourage you all to read her story. And if you ever have a chance to meet Gerry, to absolutely do that. We also have joining us on phone, Lindsay. She is such an advocate that she is driving between her parenting responsibilities and going to serve on the Children and Family Council in Butler County, Ohio. So before we jump into the panel process, we will start with her questions. But let's see, I'm just super excited that our panelists here today can talk to you about our new book, or their new book, really, Celebration of Family. As you can see, I'm a big fan of it, and it has so many stories that really inform us of perspectives we can't have. I mean, I think we only get to walk around in one body and one life experience, but the panelists today will help give us new perspectives on what it's like for them to parent with a disability. For those of you who are with the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, we know that we have different pillars that we're emphasizing, and those include equity, health and well-being, structural economic support, and resilient individuals and communities. And I can't think of better people than the folks on this panel to emphasize all of those pillars. So it's an honor to get to meet with each of you today. I'm going to go ahead and start with Lindsay so that she can move towards her first meetings. Lindsay, if you can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I'm unmuted actually. Good morning, everybody. everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday.
Wednesday, whatever day it is, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What day is it? I'm joking.
Lindsay, could you tell a little bit about yourself and your family and the support that you're using as a parent with Asperger's, please?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Lindsay Brillheart. I live in the Cincinnati area. And Butler County is just north of Cincinnati, if you know about Cincinnati. I use them a lot more for my daughter than for me. But you know what? Sometimes you learn that services tag team each other when you have kids. A lot of the services that my daughter gets, I get as well. Like, for example, and I don't know if they do this in other states and places like that, but we have an SSA, or a support and service administrator for the both of us. This lady works with both of us. Like, for example, I have a meeting with my family council, and then I have a meeting with my SSA. We're gonna do lunch, and we're gonna talk about future planning for my daughter. My daughter is at that age that we want to work on some future planning just to make sure that the goals are in place and everything else. Yes, so yeah.
This is Michelle. I love how you talked about how sometimes the services are for you, sometimes they're for the family. It's not distinct silos, right? Can you talk a little bit about what it's like raising a child as a parent with Asperger's?
I'll give you a good example. We were sitting here talking before we got the webinar started. My little girl doesn't sleep sometimes at night. I love her to death, and she's the cutest little girl ever. And there are pictures of my family in the book. So if you don't get, so you can't see me now. So in the book, I don't know what chapter it is, but in the book there are pictures of my family and I, so you know what we look like. Sorry. So my daughter has a little bit of trouble sleeping sometimes. So we had a battle last night because my daughter doesn't want to sleep. She'd rather sit and play or watch cartoons and things like that. And the battle is to get her to go to sleep. So I've had to advocate with the hospitals to give her the right medicine that she needs so she can sleep and so we can sleep. So, for example, when that medicine doesn't work, I have my partner that I've had for 13 years. It was 12 years. And we recently celebrated a 13-year anniversary. Yay, us. And we have our 21-year-old daughter living with us. So what we do is we take turns. Like, for example, if we divide the hours in the night up, everybody gets like 2 or 3 hours that we stay up and we might watch cartoons, or we might play games on our phones or whatever, and be next to Sarah, because our Sarah has had a lot of issues with anxiety. She doesn't want to be alone, is one of the things that we've learned.
Thank you. I can relate to the sleep issue. My son went to bed way later than I did last night, and it's constantly a struggle, and it affects how you go through your next day, right? Could you talk a little bit about the meeting you're on your way to? I know you're deeply involved in advocacy, and both in the Association of Successful Parenting and in the councils in Ohio. Please talk about that for us.
So family, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so family, let me back up. So the one thing, and there are a few things, and I left a paragraph for Michelle, so I forget things. Have natural support. My mom, so this morning it was crazy. We woke up at 8:40. Sarah's normally on the bus at 8:30. My mom was 10 minutes away. My mom was one of those natural supports that if something would call on her, take my daughter to school, and I can go to my meeting. So that. Okay, family council, we got a family council because we have in January of last year, it wasn't good because my daughter needed an aid. My daughter needed a one-on-one aid to help her out with things that she needed help with. Like, for example, stay in the classroom. With that anxiety, she would rather run out of the classroom and have a blast. So that helps with that. So one of the people in the wraparound said, you should be on family council. And I include Cash with family council. It's kind of part of family council, but it's not. Family council is a group of people. So I'm going to this meeting, and I am an advocate for my daughter and an advocate for all the staff advocates in Butler County. So we get together with the professionals every other month, and we talk about things that are happening in the county and how we can make things better. The one thing that we're working on, and everybody has an issue with this, is respite. I love my daughter to death, my 11-year-old, but we don't get a break. We parent 24/7. The only natural support I have is my mom. And I love my mom to death, but my mom needs a break too. So I'm working on respite to get other people around Sarah. A lot of people with disabilities would rather be alone and not with other people. They like to be with people, but not tons of people. So we're working on getting Sarah used to other people so that we can have a nice time with Sarah and without Sarah. So we're working on getting her with other people with respite and things like that. The respite situation in Ohio is that there are not enough providers for respite for Sarah and for other people. So we're working to advocate with our counties, Hamilton County, which is right by the river, Butler County, which is north, and there are 4 other counties that we're working with just to make sure our Southwest Ohio is good. And if we work together with our Southwest Ohio to be good, then we can work with the other part of the state to work what we want. So we're doing surveys and things like that with the other counties that we provide, even Butler County, and just to make sure that everything is good for those, for every kid that needs respite, and to see how we can make it better. And there's another mom working with me for her son, and her son is older, and so you can work with younger kids and older kids on the respite project.
Thank you so much for that. This is Michelle. I think that that's certainly a struggle we see in Kentucky as well, is not having enough respite providers, and also thinking about the idea of representation, like making sure that we have parents who are living every day, who are involved in our committees and our councils and informing the ways that we do our work, and then also bringing on young people. And I'm super excited. Gerry Gordon Brown is now on screen. So welcome, Gerry.
Yay!
So a lot of parenting is also that flexibility, the workarounds, whether it's using Bluetooth while you're driving or struggling for a while to figure out how to get on screen to do a panel. Lindsay, I know you have to go to your meeting. Can you tell us what advice you have for providers who are working with parents with disabilities? How can we better partner with you to break down barriers instead of creating unnecessary ones?
Well, and I was going to tell you how TAG works. With TAG, since COVID, I've talked to probably 150 professionals. There are probably 2 things. The one thing is, if you have a badge, take off that badge. We are humans, and we like to interact with other humans. Act with us as you would act with your friends. Get to know us. We are humans. We want to be loved, and we want to be interacted. And especially with the mental health, that so much is going on. We want to be a part of the community just as much as everybody else. And the other thing is, I would use people first language. We talk about how to talk about a person first and the disability second. Those are the 2 things that I would encourage.
Thank you so much. So you mean you're more than a person with a disability? You're like a mom and a friend, and you have
Oh
interests?
my goodness. Yes. Oh my goodness. And I have a partner that has people that he works with that I get to see and things like that. So yeah.
Sometimes we forget that people are more than a single story, or people are more than whatever issue we're trying to address with them. So thank you so much for that reminder.
You're welcome. Any other questions that you have for me?
I have a million, but we also have a bunch of other panelists. So I think we're going to move on. Welcome, Gerry. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm going to ask Carissa next to introduce herself and to give an image description. And then I have a few questions for you specifically, Carissa.
Okay. My name is Carissa Johnson. As far as my image description goes, I am a middle-aged white female with chin-length hair. It is brown, it is purple, and it is teal. And yes, you heard me correctly. I have purple glasses on, and I'm sitting in my office, so it's my office background. I live in Murray, Kentucky. I enjoy Go Racers, because exactly Go Racer, with my husband Ben of almost 20 years and my 7-year-old son Will. I'm gonna have to get you a new picture, Dave, because he's growing fast. But I work for the Center for Accessible Living, so I work every day with individuals with disabilities, teaching them independent living skills and just how to live their lives. So what better than a person with a disability to teach another person with a disability? But my most important role is mom. As far as you will, if you read the book, you will find out that my story started out with me wanting to become a parent naturally, and there was a lot of twists and turns and discrimination and heartache, but ultimately Will was meant to be mine, so we chose the adoption route. We're very busy. Will also has disabilities of his own. Recently he was diagnosed with ADHD and disruptive behavioral disorder, so parenting with him has been challenging, fun, exciting, all those things.
It's been a mixed bag, like it is for parenting any child, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I may have a disability, but I have the same struggles as every other mom. We wear a million hats and we do a million things, and we just go, go, go.
You mentioned the discrimination that you faced in the fostering process or in the process to get Will. Do you mind sharing some of those stories?
Sure. Most of the discrimination I faced was actually during my fertility process. I am very stubborn and very hard-headed, and so is my husband, and we wanted a child of our own. So when it didn't happen naturally, and let me give a caveat, no, it had nothing to do with my disability. That's where everybody goes. You're disabled, so you couldn't do it naturally. No, it wasn't that. But we decided to take fertility treatments and drugs, and with all of that comes blood work and appointments that you have to take. So I did blood work every month, and it's a small town, Murray. So I went to the same person, and he drew my blood every month. And you see this person regularly, so he got a little comfortable with me, and he would start to tell me, you're back again. I'm so sorry, maybe next month. And it morphed into, maybe this wasn't meant to be for you. Maybe God is trying to tell you something, that parenting would be too hard for you. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. And I'm on hormones at the time. So plug that in with him telling me negative things. It was really hard on my psyche. So unfortunately, I told my doctor I didn't address it with him. That is something I regret. But at the same time, I didn't want to say I wanted to teach, but I didn't want to attack. So I addressed it with my doctor, and he no longer drew my blood. The other story that I tell in the book was way before we even started fertility. I wanted to go off birth control, and my family practitioner had a brother with a CP and proceeded to tell me that I didn't want to do that because I couldn't parent. That was a medical physician in the early 2000s, so that still happens. As far as, I wouldn't say discrimination when I adopted. I was scared when I went to meet with that first social worker for the foster care classes and all of that stuff, because A, I was scared I wasn't going to get picked, and B, I had been looked at so negatively in the whole process that I thought they would do the same. She was wonderful, actually, but she was a little bit hesitant. I had more visits than most before she released him to be adopted. Some of my parenting choices, she reminded me about SIDS when I would prop him up and all that stuff. So she watched me more closely, and that was nerve-wracking. Yeah, I would agree with Lindsay. If you're going to work with somebody with a disability, take off your badge. We're nervous enough, as any parent is. So, develop a relationship, maybe not a friendship, but realize that we're doing the best we can, just like everybody else.
This is Michelle. One of the things from your chapter that really stood out to me is that you mentioned several times feeling like you're always on audition, and you just kind of alluded to that. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. I was raised to let people know that I am a teacher. And because of that, I have to show people what I can do. Bless my mother. I love her. And that led me to be a great advocate. But at the same time, I always have something to prove. I have to be the best mother I can be. I have to show people that I can do it. I have to not only do it, but do it well. And so when it comes to parenting, we all make mistakes and we all struggle and we all fall. So I'm always on audition, as I say. I always have to put my best face forward. And that's really difficult because we're all human beings. So I do my job 24/7 for people with disabilities. I don't clock out at 5. And it can be really hard. I know when I've taken the wheels to some of his doctor's appointments, I've had one individual, and I think I talked about this in the book, I'm playing with him, singing to him. He's sick in the doctor's office. And the lady from across the way asked if that was my son. And I said, yes. And she said, okay. And she proceeded to say to the person next to her, and I heard it, they should have never let that happen. And so instead of going all mama bear on her, which as a human is what I wanted to do, I proceeded to continue to sing to my son, and I think they offered assistance to me at one point, the nurse practitioner, as we were bringing him into the office when they called us back, and I refused, even though I was tired and I could have used that support, but I wanted to show that lady I could do it and I could do it well. So yeah, it's a blessing and a curse.
It sounds like there's a mix of grit and a lot of just kind of swallowing and continuing on and trying to deal with the public that is often not kind.
Yeah. And some of them just want to be helpful, and it's not even that they're not kind, but they don't think about the words they say.
Mhm.
I get told I'm inspiring a lot, and which is awesome, but at the same time, I don't want to be inspiring for getting up in the morning. I don't want to be inspiring for being a parent, because everybody does that. And there's not a single mom probably in this audience or in this world that doesn't do the same things I do. I just happen to do it sitting down. So that's not inspiring. Starting a program, that may be inspiring. Doing something special, that's inspiring. Go for it. But I myself, just for living my day-to-day life, I'm not inspiring. I'm not your champion. Don't use me in that way.
Thank you so much for those words. Sandra, you've been very quiet. I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your family, and then I have some questions for you as well.
Okay, my name is Sandra. I am a middle-aged African-American woman. Today my hair is wavy, and I think that this week it is some sort of copper. I think I am chapter 16 in the book. I was a single mom. I was inspired to adopt, I suppose. I saw an episode, one of the first episodes of Wednesday's Child on our local television station, and I was an older teen, and I said, you know, one of these days after I have my own children, I'm going to do that. There was just no doubt in my mind that I was going to do that. And I will say honestly, I have my voiceover on, so I hear all sorts of things. So what else am I supposed to answer? I apologize for that.
This is Michelle. Really just a sense of your family and some of the struggles that you have faced
Okay.
as a parent with a disability.
Well, you know, since my children were adopted, you know, I was married and we did want to have children. I was married quite young, younger than probably I should have been, but we tried to have a child in the natural way. And because I had taken lots and lots of medication to deal with glaucoma, which is a part of my eye condition, it left me with the inability to conceive. So somewhere in that process, my husband got frustrated, A, because I couldn't conceive, B, because I was quickly losing my vision. So C, he exited. Well, I thought I'd try again, and that one exited too. But in that situation, we had gone to the one of the adoption seminars that the state has. I was quite nervous, but at that time I could see fairly well. I didn't use the long white cane. My husband could see a bit better than me. So we approached it with, we can do this. And nobody really said anything. Well, somewhere that in that process, he exited the program. And I asked the instructor that I had, you know, when I get my life back together, because, you know, divorce, that was a bit traumatic and everything was gone. I had to start over. And she said, sure, when you get it together, you can come back as a single parent. So I did. When I came back, my vision was a little bit worse. I went into a program, I think they called it concurrent planning at that time. It was a really big book that was handed to me. Of course, it was in print. I never told them I couldn't read it. And I went on for the most part, when working with the cabinet, I had a very positive experience when adopting my son. You know, when you do this as a parent with a disability, you tend to have more people than most parents have in their home. Generally, a person has a baby, they take it home, and they parent. Bring the baby home, and you've got a social worker in the house. In my case, they came a lot. And when I got my son, I knew that he wasn't as 9-month-old babies should be. He didn't move. 9 months old, so they're supposed to move, they're supposed to reach, they're supposed to babble. And he didn't. And he hadn't been in state's care very long. So I really don't think the folks knew about his disabilities. They thought that he might be blind. Of course, I was thinking, oh yeah, give the blind woman the blind baby. Okay, whatever, I'll take him, yay. And but I discovered, along with a lot of workers, lots of things with my son that were just not normal. So that meant a lot of a lot of physical, visual. And I think that's when things got a little iffy. I don't think I wrote about it too much in the book. When I was doing the book, I was caring for a couple of my grandchildren. But the thing that was so frustrating is when I would bring this baby into a doctor or to one of the physical or occupational therapists, the first question was, oh, not how is the little boy today? It was, oh, you can't see. Well, no, I can't. And we're not here about me. I'm good with the can't see part. You know, so I would often go in with a script and say, this appointment is not about me. I'm a well-adjusted person. I just want to know how to help my child. Because me is what they seem to see rather than my child and later children who had lots of varying disabilities and disorders. You know, it was not about me, only to the degree that how would I, as a mom, a single blind mom, handle the needs of these kids?
There were a lot of assumptions that you couldn't do something versus seeing you as a fully capable adult who already had their life figured out and actually took on a child with many challenges that many other people may not take on.
True. And I mean, I was told when my son was 13 months and I, took him to a neurologist and I was stressed. I was at the hospital. He had to be, put to sleep. And, it was challenging. And the doctor came out, told me A, B, C, D about him. And he was in foster care with me for quite a while. And he said, this child is never gonna see. He's never going to know who you are. He will not walk or talk. That's gonna be hard, and nobody will blame you if you just give him back.
How did that feel as a mom?
I had to wonder, would a physician, who is supposed to be highly educated and trained, I think they may have missed the bedside manner class, but would they say that to biological parents? Would they say that to a parent that didn't have a disability? Would they say just give a human being back, put it somewhere where you don't know what's going to happen? I felt defeated in a way. I felt enraged, and then I felt empowered because I wasn't going to give this little boy back. And I was going to fight for whatever
Sandra, here is your
he needed.
Webinar.
And you did and continue to fight for whatever he needs.
I do. He's 20. And I'm sorry, there is my echo device going off. I don't think I made it stop, but he is 23 at this point, but he still needs, it takes a community. He
Mhm.
still has a team. He's living, yeah, maybe not the life I would have chosen for him, but he wanted to try by himself. But in order to do that to some degree of every, he is semi on his own. He does not live with me. And, I still keep in contact with some of the folks that help him, but I let him do it. But he does need that support. And he does know who I am. And he does walk and talk and see, actually. Very competent in Special Olympics, does a lot for that. So yeah.
We all want to see our kids become as independent as possible. And we also want to see them have community, right? So community looks different for each of us.
Exactly.
I'm getting a lot of curious questions in the chat and in the Q&A about what supports do help you as a woman who is blind in parenting. So would you mind sharing about some of the supports or some of the technology you use on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. I didn't really have supports. I was the teacher. I was the support for so many other people. I didn't have a lot. I was fortunate, and I have an odd perspective, I think, because, second generation, and I will say the first time around with the cabinet, I had quite a few supports. Those people when my kids were little were pretty awesome. So they served as support and gave me at least direction. Most of the agencies I worked with, a lot of them represented here today, were very supportive and gave me direction. Now, my parents and younger sisters didn't live far from me when I'm sorry, there's probably a cat in my picture. They didn't live too far from me, but what is different about my entire family is both my mom and dad were totally blind. My sister's totally blind. My brother-in-law's totally blind. The only person that had any usable sight at that time was me. So I was often the support for everyone else. Now, I knew where to go for help, but I worked at that agency where you went to for help. And when someone went, I was usually the person they sent to provide that help. So honestly, I
Oh.
had quite a few friends, and we helped each other as far as our kids playing together. But in the big scheme of things, no. Technology, what did I use? I used what's called a CCTV. That was when I don't see well enough now, pretty much not at all. But when my kids were coming through school, I used a machine that would help me be able to help them with their homework. I could read the print and help them with that. I devised little things for myself. Just when I took them to the park, and I did, they'd wear the brightest clothes I could find for them so that I could see them. Oh, cat alert, see them. I used what was called a monocular, so I could on a bench and watch them play. I used one of those hand holder things, but sometimes when you use folks thought, oh, she can't keep track of her kids without that. But I know way more folks with total vision that use those than I do parents who are blind. I was a bus rider, so I was always with the kids on the fixed route buses. So, I had to hold on to them, keeping track of 2 2-year-olds. My kids were only 6 months apart. It was like having twins. I had to use that. So it was very low tech. Obviously, I used Braille and would Braille some of the storybooks so I could read them more. I would pen their outfits together when they were babies. I was pretty clothes conscious as a mom because I wanted them always to look their best, because I thought that how they looked was a reflection on me. I would not let them walk around with popsicle stains, or I carried so many outfits in the diaper bag because I wouldn't let them have anything on them, since I thought they might be a reflection of what folks thought about me and my ability to parent.
It's kind of back to that feeling like you're always on audition kind of thing. It held to different standards than a parent who doesn't have a visible disability.
Definitely, I felt a different standard, but as a person with a disability, I believe it was mentioned by another panelist, you always feel or are made to feel that you have to be stronger, brighter, smarter, than anyone else, just to prove yourself as a valuable, viable person in today's society.
There's several parts of your chapter where you talk about professionals not giving you the full story or accurate information, either about yourself or about your children. How did that affect your ability to make empowered choices about your life? And what advice do you have for professionals on the webinar about interacting with parents with disabilities?
No, sometimes I think, especially in the medical profession, whether it was dealing with me and no one telling me at the time I started taking that medicine when I was 16 years old. As a 16-year-old female, if the doctors knew that medicine could cause those side effects, I should have been told. I theorized that perhaps I wasn't told, since the doctors probably figured a 16-year-old visually impaired girl wasn't going to grow up, get married, and try to have a family. What I would say to professionals is just be on it.
Oh, you faded out there for a second.
I'm here.
Be on it. And then what did you say after that?
We can take it, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's ugly. Just due to the fact we have a disability doesn't mean we can't hear the hard stuff. We can. Just be frank, be honest, and most of all, if you don't know, ask. Don't assume we can't or we won't. Just ask. We're more than willing to answer and educate to the best of our abilities.
The assumptions can cause so many problems, right? Both personally and long term.
Correct. Yes.
And sometimes we just get afraid to ask or afraid to remember that this is a person who just is trying to get through their day too, right?
Oh yes, and getting through my son had a lot of physical disabilities. When you go through the adoption process, there's a form that you fill out, and you will take a child who is deaf or hard of hearing, you will take a child who is blind, you will take a child, and I went through this list, and there were a couple of things I checked. I said,
There were a couple of things you checked, and then we lost you again.
Who'd been through specific types of abuse, and everything I checked that I said I was not comfortable with, I got. And it's okay, because I got some awesome kids, but it made it challenging. It made it challenging.
I heard somebody say once that you don't parent the kid you want, you parent the kid you get. And a lot of times our expectations of who we're going to have and who they become or who they're becoming are very different. And it sounds like that's true for parents with disabilities and parents who don't have disabilities.
It is. And I think when you're a parent with a disability and you have children, I'm so sorry, allergies, such needs. And my daughter was a child of, and
We're having some audio problems with you. I'm so sorry.
my child was my daughter was a very hurt child. I didn't do it. I had to deal with it, but I didn't do it. And, you know, when you're dealing with a child who is 5 or 6 and who had a wonderful gift in that imagination department and made up these elaborate stories about the mom and all these varying and dangerous types of abuse and would say that. And I can look back and kind of smile now, but going through it, it wasn't funny.
Right.
You know, I was pictured as an alcoholic who just stayed on the sofa all day and only wore a t-shirt. And, you know, she was 6, I think. And I got called into a room and was asked about my drinking habits and what type of clothes I wore around my children. And I said, well, I don't drink. I wear pants. And, you know, I'm like, where is this coming from? And I finally figured out what had gone on. And that was with an agency that's probably represented today. And, you know, and I had to educate them and say, hey, guys, I'm blind. It's okay. You can ask. They were just so afraid seemingly to ask me these things, but yet believed the 6-year-old in that this was gospel. So I was a teacher at my office. It's what I did for 20 years, teaching. And I was a teacher to my children when I would get home and teaching them how to navigate life. And I was a teacher to service providers who were supposedly there to assist with the children and navigating, you know, through certain parts of this parenting.
You were always a teacher and never had much of an exhale, it sounds like. Thank you so much.
There went my speech. I hear nothing.
Uh-oh. Sandra, can you hear me now? Oh, she's on mute now. Thank you so much for your words and for your story and for teaching us. I know that can be exhausting, and I hear over and over again from friends and colleagues who have disabilities that the education part is exhausting, that having to go through their life every day and not just be able to do the thing, but have to educate and fight for the thing is always a struggle. I want us to turn to Gerry now. Gerry has been one of my teachers and one of my mentors, and I'm so grateful that you fought and fought to get on this webinar, Gerry. Thank you for all your effort to connect. Would you give an image description and tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. It's an honor to be here today because it's been a little bit of a struggle. But with your help, Michelle, I've been able to make it. First of all, I want to say that I was born with a bilateral hearing loss from birth. My parents were RH positive and RH negative. In the meantime, I have completed my education at Kentucky State, the University of Cincinnati, Webster University for a graduate degree, and then also a 2-year graduate program at Gallaudet University. I have been married and divorced, but I am for the most part a single mom to a wonderful daughter, and I have 3 grandsons and 4 great-grandchildren. I worked since the age of 14. I retired from Frankfort, Commonwealth of Kentucky, as director of the Kentucky Client Assistance Program after 20 years. I am on volunteer boards and advisory councils at this point. And I think that's kind of sums it up for your question now. I need another question, Michelle.
All right, I have another question. A lot of your chapter opens up with information about your 60 years of involvement in the civil rights movement. As a student at KSU, you met with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Of course.
Could you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up as a person who was hard of hearing before the Civil Rights Act and before the Americans with Disabilities Act? What have you seen change in those years and what has stayed the same?
Okay, I was a senior. Oh, by the way, Michelle, closed caption has been disabled.
It should.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm being able to hear you okay. But you know, I like closed caption. But
Okay.
anyway,
I'll work on that in the background. Some people are saying they can see it. Are you on a desktop, Gerry?
Say it one more time. Say it one more time.
On the desktop, at the bottom of your screen,
Okay.
you could see a CC.
And see, I agree with you, but you know what? I don't have a CC at the bottom of the screen.
Huh. I am not sure what's happening because usually on your individual device.
Yeah, that's what I'm used to, seeing the CC at the bottom of the screen, but there's none.
You might want to look under more. Does she have more options?
On the right of your screen, there should be a more. Sometimes it's 3 dots.
Nothing. But let me go on and answer your question because I can understand, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm so sorry about
as a student at Kentucky State University during my day, it was a college, okay? And in 1964, Dr. Martin Luther King came to Frankfort to do advocacy on public housing, open housing. And I was a senior and my classmates and I joined the march in downtown Frankfort. At that time, that law was not passed. It was later on. But Dr. Martin Luther King was very personable, very approachable, and we survived all of our necessary advocacy efforts. And then while I was working, we had the 50th anniversary of the March on Frankfort, which was really outstanding. We had John J. Johnson and many, many others, Gerald Neal, among others, to speak and so forth, to bring attention to that particular law. Eventually, the law was passed. As far as things coming up to modern day, I think some changes have been made, but we really do have a long way to go. We also have, you know, during my time, the ADA was passed. And before that, there was no law on the books to protect us against discrimination. And we just have to keep moving, especially now. We got to make sure that we vote. I think that's about the best way I can sum it up.
Thank you. In your chapter, you also talk about an instance when a nurse writes in your chart very mistakenly that you were mentally retarded. We would use the term intellectual disability now. What assumptions have you had to overcome as a person of color and as a parent with a disability?
Okay, I can remember two particular situations in which I was discriminated against. Shortly after I gave birth to Carla and went back to work, I worked for the state of Ohio. One of my coworkers stated that since I was divorced, that I should give my daughter up so she could have two parents. And I said, no, I will not be giving her up. And I said, that's not necessary. The other situation was when I came home here in Louisville. My grandsons were playing softball in Shawnee Park, and I passed out. It was in June. It was terribly hot, very humid. And in the meantime, I was taken by ambulance to one of the local hospitals. And in the process of being transported, I was coherent. I was able to answer all the questions that the nurse was asking me. My daughter was with me, but she didn't have to speak on my behalf. So we went through the process, and in the meantime, the doctor wanted me to be admitted to make sure that all was well. Well, at that time, my particular healthcare would not pay the bill. So I had to request an appeal. And my daughter said, Mama, you need to get your medical records. I received my medical records, and in my medical records, the nurse had written that I was mentally retarded and that I had a hysterectomy. And both of those are untrue. I tried to do advocacy on my own behalf by calling medical records at this particular hospital, but the person in charge would not allow that change. So I ended up having to get the help of an attorney. At that time, Attorney Dale Owens assisted me. He made the change in one phone call, and it was removed. So I don't know. I don't know. We still have situations like that, I'm sure, that pop up that we have to take a stand. And as persons with disabilities, we need to know our rights and we need to speak up. Otherwise, it will continue to happen.
Thank you, Gerry. Unfortunately, that's so true. And I wonder, what do you think people on this call need to know about the Americans with Disabilities Act? What do people just overlook or ignore? And how does that cause barriers for you?
You know, I agree with you. People overlook, and more importantly, they don't take it seriously. They need to educate themselves about the ADA, and we as persons with disabilities really need to know our rights, and we need to know all aspects of that law. And when things happen in which we are discriminated against, we need to take a stand. We need to speak up, because letting it pass is not going to solve the problem. And you can do it in a very intelligent way. It's not necessary to be nasty, but speak up on your behalf so it doesn't happen to someone else that comes behind you.
One thing you say in your chapter is that there is no script for raising a child for a parent with or without a disability. What advice do you have for parents with or without disabilities?
For sure, there's no script. I mean, it's the master class. In the master class, we learn, we teach, we experience disappointments, we experience setbacks, but we learn from all of that. We have to refer to the way that we were raised. That's all we have to build on. But in the meantime, as a result of our book, to my knowledge, we have discovered there is no book on the market for persons with disabilities until we came along. So we just need to add to that. But there are many, many books for persons who are non-disabled. So we have a market to fill.
This is Michelle. I feel like you are a master class. I could just listen to you like all day. And I'm so grateful that you connected. And I'm so sorry that the captioning isn't working right.
Okay, but that's okay. I can hear you very well. And I've been around you long enough, I can lip read you.
Okay.
Okay.
That
And
might
if
be
I don't, and if I don't understand, I will speak up, okay? I
fantastic.
want to answer appropriately.
One of the beauties of this book is that it finally does give voice to parents with disabilities. And like you said, Gerry, that's incredibly rare. So we're finally going to let Dave talk, and we're finally going to let him give an image description and talk about how this book came to be. Dave? You're on mute. It has to happen on every Zoom call, right?
It has to happen. Sorry. Thanks, Michelle. So my name is Dave Matheis, and my image description is I look like Santa Claus. So I have a bushy white beard and glasses and gray hair, and you can't see, but I have some of the belly part too of Santa Claus. But anyway, so thanks for doing this. It's mentioned earlier, I work part-time for the Center for Accessible Living, and the center is an independent living center, receives federal money, and as part of the mandate from the federal government, more than half the people working there have to have disabilities. So, and some of the parents, some of the people who work at the center are parents with disabilities, and this all started with a conversation between me, myself, Donna Fox, and Carissa Johnson, who's on the call today. And they were talking about their parenting experiences and some of the problems they had, which Carissa's mentioned already. Donna Fox had the Child Protective Services called on her just because she had a disability at one point. So we thought it would be a good idea to get more information out to people about parents with disabilities. And we started doing some panels at conferences and stuff and things. Carissa was part of that, and a few other people. Jason Jones, a parent with a disability, was the moderator for the panels. We did about 4 of those. And then this was in the fall of 2019, and then the spring of 2020, what happened, but the COVID pandemic. So we decided at that point, since that kind of took us out of doing anything in person, well, this might make a good book, because we had been in touch with a lot of parents with disabilities and a lot of great stories. And at that point, we decided to try to put a book together to just demonstrate how parenting is possible for everyone, and also to show how bias and discrimination still exists for people with disabilities becoming parents. And as has been mentioned, to demonstrate to young people with disabilities considering parenthood what was possible. So that's basically why we put the book together. I want to talk a little bit about the process. We started with Zoom interviews. This was during COVID. So we would do Zoom interviews using a set of 8 questions that Jason Jones and I developed. We would give the same questions to all the parents. I would interview them on Zoom. And then I would take the audio from the interviews, run it through transcription software, and turn it into a coherent narrative. That's how 18 of the stories were done. And the guinea pig on that was Carissa Johnson, who's here today. She was the first interview. And the parents were allowed to review the results and change it in any way. Most parents left it pretty much alone. A couple of parents made some significant changes. 10 parents submitted their story directly to me. They wrote it up, and submitted to me. I should mention Sandra was an interview, but Gerry submitted her story to me, and Lindsay, who was on the call earlier, was also an interview. So in Gerry's case, most stories stories that were submitted, I just put in the book pretty much unchanged. But in Gerry's case, we had coffee on her back porch one morning, and she started telling me things like meeting Dr. Martin Luther King, and Jackie Robinson was there too. I don't know if Gerry mentioned that. And she said she was in the class behind the greatest of all time at Central High School, Muhammad Ali. And her mother, she moved to Louisville with her family because her mother went to Waverly Hills for treatment for TB. Well, I had to put all that in the story. So we wrote Gerry's story. We rewrote Gerry's story to include all that. And so that's how 28 of the stories went. 18 were interviews and 10 were submitted directly by parents. And then we had 2 articles reprinted from other sources. Most of the families I knew personally, 22 of the families are for Kentucky families. And 8 of the stories came from other states. 2 are from the Cincinnati area. Lindsay was one. We also have represented in the book Arizona, New York, New Jersey, California, Washington State, and Florida. One thing we went out of state for was I had contacted several organizations looking for a parent with intellectual disability or autism who was willing to talk about their parenting, and I couldn't find anyone in Kentucky. So that's one thing we went out of the state for. A couple of those people are in the book. Lindsay, as mentioned earlier, has Asperger's syndrome. So we have all disabilities represented. And we wanted to make sure we covered all disabilities in the book. So that's how the book is put together. I guess there's 2 things I want to mention that I got from doing the book. And one of them was how open all the parents were and how willing they were to participate. And how honest, sometimes brutally honest, some of the parents were. And, after I think about it, well, everybody wants to talk about their kids. So it makes sense that they were so open and honest and willing to talk. So that's one thing that impressed me in doing the book. And the second thing was related to one of the questions we asked. We asked all the parents, and the parents that submitted their stories, we sent the questions to also if they wanted to use them as a guide. But when I did the interviews, we asked the question, what kind of adaptations or assistive devices did you need or use to help you be a more effective parent? And invariably, the parent would respond with one version of, well, I think my child adapted to me more than I had to adapt to my child. And to me, that demonstrated how resilient children are. And more than that, normal is different for everybody. So when you grow up, and normal is what you grow up with, and the kids just learn to adapt to that. And one little story that kind of demonstrated it to me in a somewhat humorous way. We contacted Rick, one of the parents. I think he's chapter 15. His story is a little different. Rick wanted to write his story up, and it was only a couple pages, but his daughter, who found out about what he was doing, also wanted to contribute. So she wrote part of his story, and they're combined in one chapter. Rick was born blind and almost deaf, and he married a woman who didn't have a disability, and they wanted to be parents. And they tried to conceive and really did not, were not able to do it and did not want to pursue any artificial means of conceiving. So they were looking to adopt. And like Sandra mentioned, Wednesday's Child, the local program, they saw on one episode an infant who had a visual impairment, and they said, that's our child. And sure enough, after a few months, they were able to adopt the child they had saw on the program. And Rick made it a habit as she grew up to read to her every night. And she came to depend on that and to love that. And at one point he had to leave home for a few days to get his new service dog, his new guide dog. So her mother substituted for the reading every night. And when Rick came back into town, his daughter said, I'm so glad you're back. I don't like the way mom reads. She reads with the light on. And I just thought that was proof of how kids adapt, because Rick was reading with Braille, didn't need the lights, and she much preferred the reading without the lights on. That's one of my favorite stories.
That was cute.
So that's pretty much in a nutshell how we put the book together.
Thank you so much, Dave, for having the vision to work with the team at Cal and to do this, because it's such an important book that brings forth a lot of life experiences that we don't think about as much as we should. And I love the title because it really is a celebration of family. Family comes in so many different ways. And all of you here on the panel have really demonstrated that, and demonstrated that the one thing we all have in common is that deep love, that mama bear, that papa bear thing for our kids. And we're going to figure out a way, whether or not a person has a disability. And often it's barriers we put in place that don't need to be there. And you continually work to reduce those barriers or to get around them or to beat through them or whatever you need to do to make sure your families have what they need. I think too about the generational impact, and I think about that little girl reading with her dad, and that's Marissa. And Marissa was actually an intern at our department and worked with AmeriCorps, and I hadn't seen her in years, and went to one of the panels at the library, and it was so cool just to see her with her family, and I didn't know the whole backstory. So it's beautiful to see how open everyone has been. I am only seeing one comment in the questions. Janet thinks you're a great looking Santa, Dave. So there you go.
A new career.
And I think we have about 10 minutes left. And I'm just curious from our panelists, what didn't you get a chance to share that you wish we would have asked today? Are there thoughts going through your heads, and as you think about our audience and you think about us trying to come together to share these stories, and providers being out there trying to have a new perspective and fresh eyes on working with families?
This is Sandra.
Go ahead.
And I just, one of the things I don't think we talked about was navigating the court system with whatever you have to navigate with. And that if we have someone representing us, whether it's a social worker, whether it's an advocate, listen to us. Listen to us as parents. We know. I had some negative experiences with the court system, and those negative experiences, because I was not listened to. Decisions were made solely on the basis of my blindness. This has to do with my grandchildren, which put a whole generation of children in danger. And it all started when a judge said, you cannot You will not, because you're blind. If you open your mouth in my courtroom, you will be in contempt. My representative got scared and didn't help me defend myself and put people at risk. So listen to us. We know we're able, and we love our children too.
You are the experts on your own child. You are the experts on your own experience, and that needs to be respected, elevated, and centered.
This is Carissa. I just had an idea. As social workers and helping professionals, you use developmental skills for children. If they have a parent with a disability and they've learned to adapt in a different way, those developmental skills may or may not be accurate. And I'll give you an example. My son was delayed in a very early age because he wasn't able to climb stairs. He also wasn't able to do, they said he didn't play on the floor appropriately. Well, he was never taught to play on the floor because mommy can't get to the floor. And I literally had to tell people this, or he doesn't climb stairs because he goes with me. So you're going to have to teach him because that's one thing I cannot do. And they just looked at me and they were like, oh, the light bulb went off. But just looking at his skills, he was delayed developmentally.
That's such a great example. I think too about children who have deaf or hard of hearing parents who use sign language, and they may have speech delays. It's not because of their having a disability of speech, it's because of their exposure. And so they just have to learn how to talk because that doesn't happen in their house. Gerry, what did you have?
Yes, I was just going to, in addition to everything else we've said, for the non-disabled population to realize that we have the same needs as they do. And the biggest problem, of course, is what we always say, attitude is the biggest disability. And all we need is services and resources like everybody else. And it wanted to be treated equally.
Exactly. I have 2 questions in the chat that I see. The first one is to Ms. Williams and Ms. Gordon Brown. Would either of you say that your race contributed in any way to the degree at which you were discriminated against?
Sandra, you want me to go first?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Definitely, I guess you could say I have 3 points. I'm female, I have a disability, and I'm African American. Being African American is still a problem in our society, and I guess it always will be. And with nowadays, it's just a big issue. But what we've always done, we've been determined to take our place. And the other thing is we know our rights. So we just have to take a stand, be determined, and move on, because the important things that's in our lives are our children. Our children are the main characters and the main players. And it's our responsibilities as parents to do what we can to raise our children properly. But race will always be a problem, I feel. It's not going to go away.
I think that for me, it really wasn't blatant. I have the same 3 as Gerry. African American, a woman, I have a disability. And I think where I noticed anything, and like I said, it was not blatant, but during the time I was raising my children, I lived in a particular zip code. And mostly African American folks live in that zip code. So a lot of inferences were made to where I lived, and perhaps my children were behaving the way they behaved, or knew or didn't know what they knew or didn't know, due to the fact that as do with anything, it's just a set of numbers used to deliver mail. It is not where you live, it is how you live. And it can't be assumed or presumed that just because one lives in that zip code, that they are less than.
And then the other things, in addition to what Sandra said, we just have to teach our children to feel good about themselves. It's very important. So the education begins at home. Also, this business of critical race theory in the school system, you know, one of the problems is we don't talk about it. We just sort of like sweep it under the rug, and that's not going to solve anything. It's better to talk about it, and then we can come together.
Yeah, talking, whether it's parent to child, child to provider, parent to provider, there always has to be an open dialogue. I remember, because to be honest, I don't have a lot of African American friends, and I don't have a lot of African American male friends. So I, as a mom, had to have that discussion with my son. Son, it's probably not a grand idea for you to wear a black hoodie and a Halloween mask into a particular store. And my son has an intellectual disability, and he would wear a Halloween mask, every day when he was a teenager. And, I had to explain that to him. So talking, being open about it does exist. I still have those conversations, quite frequently. Stand up for yourself. It doesn't matter. Stand strong, stand tall, stand proud. Look this world in the eye. Pardon the pun, visually impaired woman.
Those are some beautiful words, though, to start wrapping us up, because I think that it's when we try to hide who we are, when we try to ignore something, when we try to be afraid of each other, that we have more problems. And I'm so grateful for this book and for all of you being open and sharing your stories, because that starts the dialogue, right? It starts it's okay to ask a question. It's okay to be with somebody in a very real and authentic way, and to talk about who we are and to connect human to human. So I'm just thankful for all of you, for your contributions to our conversation today. And I encourage all of you on the call to please buy the book and read more, or attend panels that have some of the other panelists. Every time I see any of these panelists, I get something else out of it. So Dave, it looks like you have final thoughts.
Well, you posted the link to the book if people want to purchase it. I just wanted to make sure people knew it's on Amazon. It's also available locally in Louisville at Carmichael's bookstore. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that. Thanks.
Buy local or buy online, whatever works for you. And several of you had questions about specific resources. I'm going to put my email in the chat so you can reach out about resources as well. We really wanted to center the experiences of our panelists as parents today, and to not necessarily go down the rabbit hole of what resources for this client or that client. I really wanted to really think about who Sandra is, who Gerry is, who Carissa is, and who Lindsay is, so that we could really think about that. So we are happy to share resources with you. There just was not time to do all of that in our panel today. So thank you to our language access providers, to Tracy, our captionist, and to Julie and Jessica, our interpreters. Thank you, Lee, for coordinating this. And I hope everyone leaves today feeling ready to connect in new ways and feeling more open-minded and open-hearted and celebrates family in all of its many forms. So thank you all so much and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you, Michelle.